This gang was so bold they committed their crimes knowing they were on video and even flooded social media with photos showing them with deadly weapons and wads of cash.
Tonight, the leaders of that gang sitting in prison and the agency that took them down warning others to stop the violence or suffer a similar fate.
A 3-year investigation came crashing down on the almighty vice lord nation. Federal authorities announcing racketeering, gun and drug charges handed down by a grand jury against 40 members and associates. 4 are still at large. The feds say
3 dozen violent criminals are off the streets. The U.S. attorney says that they have ties to the Latin Counts gang in southwest Detroit. And as Fox News' Robin Schwartz reports, the arrests are part of a joint effort called Detroit
in the streets of Detroit for the past 4 years or so, but this morning a violent Detroit gang has been dealt a major blow.
Yeah, they're known as the Hustle Boys, and in just a few hours...
Detroit has long been a battleground for violent street gangs, each vying for control through a relentless cycle of crime, intimidation, and brutality. From the Latin Counts to the Bann Crew, these gangs have left a trail of devastation across the city, fueling a surge in drug trafficking and other criminal activities. Through coordinated efforts like the Detroit One Initiative, law enforcement has been working tirelessly to dismantle these dangerous organizations, bringing gang members to justice and striving to restore peace to Detroit's hardest-hit neighborhoods. This overview highlights key developments in the federal crackdown on some of the city's most notorious gangs.
Right now, nearly 3 dozen violent criminals are off the streets. The U.S. attorney says that they have ties to the Latin Counts gang in southwest Detroit. And as Fox News' Robin Schwartz reports, the arrests are part of a joint effort called Detroit One.
The Big Apple Market on McGraw in southwest Detroit was the scene of in April, now connected to the Latin Counts street gang. U.S. Attorney Barbara McQuaid stood with Detroit's police chief and members of the state police and FBI to announce 33 indictments tied to the gang, believed to be responsible for the murder of 20-year-old Mustafa Al-Yassiri. The alleged gang members are also accused of robberies, burglaries, gun thefts, and drug sales.
In a significant development for law enforcement in Detroit, the culmination of the Detroit One Initiative has led to the final guilty plea in a series of prosecutions targeting the notorious Latin Counts street gang. Attorney Matthew Schneider announced today that the 12th and final gang member, 28-year-old Kyle Volz from Lincoln Park, has pleaded guilty to racketeering conspiracy in connection with the gang's criminal activities. This plea marks a pivotal moment in the federal crackdown on one of Detroit's most violent street gangs. Volz entered his guilty plea in federal court in Ann Arbor before U.S. District Judge Judith Levy, admitting to his role in the racketeering conspiracy that included attempted robbery and other violent crimes. With this plea, Volz now faces up to 30 years in prison, bringing an end to his involvement in the gang's reign of terror in southwest Detroit and the downriver communities of Lincoln Park and Ecorse. The indictment against the Latin Counts painted a grim picture of the gang's operations, which included assaults, drug trafficking, stolen firearms, and various forms of robbery. The gang, known for its ruthless use of violence, sought to control its territory through intimidation, targeting both rival gangs and innocent residents in the area. As part of his guilty plea, Volz accepted responsibility for his role in deletion of Terrence McLaren and the shooting of another victim on August 18, 2013. He also admitted to assaulting and attempting to rob a different individual on April 29, 2014. His plea follows the sentencing of 3 other Latin Counts members for their involvement in McLaren's deletion. The federal case also highlighted the role of Isidro Garza, the head of the Latin Counts in Michigan, who was sentenced to 10 years in prison earlier this year. Garza, despite being incarcerated in the Michigan Department of Corrections, continued to lead the gang, disseminating orders and maintaining control over its operations. He was already serving a lengthy sentence of 25 to 50 years for a gang-related deletion committed in 1993. Another key figure in the gang's leadership, Benjamin Badel, who served as the Minister of Information, pleaded guilty to racketeering conspiracy on January 29, 2018. Badel, responsible for relaying Garza's directives to lower-ranking members, faces a 10-year prison sentence.
With this morning, a violent Detroit gang has been dealt a major blow.
Yeah, they're known as the Hustle Boys, and in just a few hours, they'll go before a judge.
A 4-year investigation involving state, county, and Detroit police revealed. The FBI also says that this gang was based out of a Detroit home at 7 Mile and Hoover, that the Hustle Boys formed 6 or 7 years ago. And when they started, they were promoting events at nightclubs, but they eventually started dealing drugs. Of the 10 accused gang members, 8 are in custody and face a judge in federal court today. The other 2 are expected to turn themselves in. They were all charged with conspiracy and dealing drugs.
In November 2012, a jury found Gaskin, a member of Detroit's notorious Hustle Boys gang, guilty of participating in a drug conspiracy and possessing illegal drugs with intent to distribute. His crimes didn't stop there. On Tuesday, Gaskin pleaded guilty to witness tampering, admitting he had threatened the lives of a witness, the witness's child, and the child's mother before his drug trial. For this, he received an additional 46-month sentence to be served concurrently with his 30-year drug trafficking sentence. Evidence revealed that from 2007 to 2011, Gaskin and other Hustle Boys members trafficked drugs from Detroit to Ohio and West Virginia. The gang used a house on Hamburg Street in Detroit to storing drugs and stash firearms. Their operations extended beyond Detroit, with members trading drugs for firearms, further fueling violence in the city. Gaskin and 9 others were indicted in 2011, but most of his co-defendants pleaded guilty before trial and received substantial sentences.
Your investigation came crashing down on the almighty Vice Lord nation. Federal authorities announcing racketeering, gun, and drug charges handed down by a grand jury against 40 members and associates. 4 are still at large. The feds say they've been in business for years on the streets and even inside Michigan's prisons.
Feds say the gang had several layers and names: Almighty Vice Lord Nation, Traveling Vice Lords, Insane Vice Lords. It had a structured system with commanders. Thousands of members across the nation, hundreds in Michigan. Their reach includes leaders and enforcers inside Michigan prisons.
In a joint sting, officers were able to raid 13 homes in Detroit and Chicago, one of them being on Hubble Avenue.
I think it's just guilt by association.
The person who lives there in question, alleged leader of the Michigan Vice Lords, Kevin Fordham, also known as Spaghetti. Yet his girlfriend, who did not want to be identified, is saying that's not like him at all.
I've known this man for 17 years. We raising grandbabies together. I just don't understand this. He's not that kind of guy.
However, the ATF is saying he hasn't been doing the dirty work and that it's a hierarchy structure that's kept him out of trouble all this time, at least until now.
Mr. Fordham in this gang has several layers of insulation to avoid detection from law enforcement.
In a significant crackdown on violent crime, the federal government has indicted 40 alleged members of the almighty Vice Lord Nation gang in Detroit. These individuals face charges including robbery, drug trafficking, and unlawful gun possession, and other violent crimes. The 120-page indictment reveals the gang's extensive criminal activities, which have terrorized communities across the country for decades. Among those indicted is Kevin Spaghetti Fordham, an alleged gang leader who has no prior felony convictions, a tactic used by the gang to protect its leadership. The Vice Lords, a national gang founded in Chicago, are deeply entrenched in drug trafficking and other violent crimes, with a strong presence within the Michigan Department of Corrections. As part of the operation, authorities have arrested 38 of the 40 indicted individuals and seized numerous firearms and other drugs. In a major federal crackdown, 5 members of the young and scandalous street gang have been indicted on charges including arson and racketeering and other violent crimes, exposing their decade-long reign of terror in Detroit's Brightmoor neighborhood. The indictment, unsealed on Friday, details how the gang, also known as Young and Scandalous, allegedly sought to dominate the local drug trade through violence and intimidation, leading to the deaths of at least 3 people. The indictment describes numerous violent acts by the gang, including a 2010 arson at a Marathon gas station, the 2013 deletion of TW during a robbery, and the 2015 deletion of B at the Victory Inn Motel. Prosecutors allege the gang used social media to boast about their crimes, enhancing their reputation and deterring witnesses from cooperating with law enforcement. The young and scandalous gang's violent grip on Brightmoor has left residents living in fear, enduring frequent shootings and robberies. This indictment is part of ongoing efforts to dismantle Detroit's most dangerous gangs and restore safety to the city's neighborhoods. In a major crackdown on organized crime, a federal grand jury has indicted 8 members of a Detroit-based fraud ring known as the Free Bann Gang on charges including conspiracy to commit wire fraud, money laundering, and aggravated identity theft. Attorney Matthew Schneider details a 3-year scheme that led to millions in losses. The defendants Triano Adams, Anthony Adams, Devin Simmons, Atif Brown, Oda Williams, Danico Adams, Rodney Gist, and Tyan Jackson allegedly used stolen credit card information to create cloned cards. They then traveled across the U.S., targeting Walmart stores to purchase large amounts of gift cards, which they sold for cash in Michigan. One notable incident involved 2 defendants making over $100,000 in fraudulent purchases at 10 Walmart stores in just 9 hours. Attorney Schneider emphasized the group's calculated operations and Michigan's ongoing efforts to combat identity theft. Postal Inspection Service, Secret Service, and Walmart's Global Investigations team were instrumental in uncovering the full scope of the fraud.
An undercover agent from the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms is speaking out for the first time, revealing how the agency took down the vicious street gang in Northwest Detroit known as Bann Crew. This gang was so bold they committed their crimes knowing they were on video and even flooded social media with photos showing them with deadly weapons and wads of cash.
Tonight, the leaders of that gang sitting in prison.
Looking at video of Bann Crew gang members in action, a ruthless crew that ran Detroit's northwest side until the feds teamed up with local police to take them down. They specialized in taking over gas stations. A few years ago, they were so brazen, they robbed customers and shot at rival gang members, all on video. They knew surveillance cameras were rolling. They simply did not care.
To not only participate in a shooting, but then to remain at a gas station at an extended period of time after the shooting had occurred, where the gas attendant is calling 911 and they're sitting there contemplating, well, should we get a drink?
8 members of the Bann Crew, a street gang in northwest Detroit, have been indicted on charges of attempted deletion, robbery, and shootings as part of the Detroit One Initiative, a collaborative effort between law enforcement and the community to reduce violent crime in the city. The indictment reveals that Bann Crew, an alliance of smaller gangs like Constantly Making Hundreds, CMH, and Young and Crispy, YNC, claimed territory in northwest Detroit, using graffiti to assert their dominance. Members engaged in violent crimes, including assaults, home invasions, and robberies, to defend their turf and uphold the gang's reputation. Among those indicted are Corey DeAndre Mapp, 22, facing charges of RICO conspiracy and assault with a dangerous weapon, and Alexander Tianti Johnson, 20, charged with RICO conspiracy. The charges represent a significant step in dismantling the gang's operations and reducing violence in Detroit. The successful indictments and guilty pleas of gang members across Detroit mark a significant victory in the fight against organized crime. While the city continues to grapple with the legacy of gang violence, these law enforcement efforts have struck a critical blow to the operations of these dangerous groups. The cases discussed underscore the ongoing commitment to bringing justice to communities that have long suffered under the grip of these violent gangs. As federal and local authorities press forward, there is hope that these actions will lead to a safer, more stable future for Detroit and its residents.